WFYI podcast brought to you by Bloomington, Indiana, an American college town offering food and drink, college sports, outdoor activities, live music, cool art, and good times daily. Everyone is welcome in Bloomington. More information at visitbloomington.com.
This is WFYI News Now. It's April 30th, and I'm Abriana Herron. On today's show, young people call for an end to gun violence at the first annual Peace Walk. Efforts to eliminate the statute of limitations for some sex crimes. And LGBTQ athletes and allies rally to support transgender athletes.
Ostensibly by saying, okay, well, we're going to limit testosterone, they're saying we're not allowing trans athletes to participate.
Those stories coming up. But first, an update on the situation at IU Bloomington, where state and IU police over the weekend arrested 23 protesters and dispersed an anti-war demonstration in IU's Dunn Meadow. It was the second time in a week that state troopers descended on the Bloomington campus to make arrests and demolish a tent encampment. Protesters set up the Gaza Solidarity encampment last Thursday. They want IU to divest from Israel and the U.S. military. On Sunday night, in an email to the university community, IU President Pamela Whitten acknowledged recent criticism over the handling of these protests. Whitten says IU is setting up a task force of students and faculty to review event protocols, particularly in Dunn Meadow. She also says the university is approving a formal request submitted by students seeking to set up temporary structures on the lawn. But a spokesperson for the IU Divestment Coalition, the group organizing the Dunn Meadow protests, says they didn't submit the request. And some state and local officials are condemning the IU administration over its handling of these anti-war protests. WFIU's Clayton Baumgarth has more.
Democratic State Representative Matt Pierce called IU's handling of peaceful protests on campus a, quote, textbook violation of the First Amendment. And Democratic Senator Shelley Yoder is, quote, deeply concerned with the arrest of students, staff, and faculty for exercising their First Amendment rights. The Indiana Senate Democrats are calling for the university to de-escalate the situation by asking all police to leave room for peaceful protest. The Monroe County NAACP also denounced the arrest, saying that the decision to call in the state police deprived protesters of the benefits of the special de-escalation training that IUPD officers receive. They are now demanding that IU drop all criminal and disciplinary charges against the protesters and rescind any actions barring enrolled students from campus. Meanwhile, numerous academic groups are also sharing their displeasure with how the protests at IU's Dunn Meadow have been handled thus far. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Clayton Baumgarth.
Around 100 people met on the near north side of Indianapolis to call for an end to gun violence on Saturday. It was the first annual Peace Walk put on by the Marion County Youth Violence Prevention Coalition. Annelle Williams lost her brother to gun violence a few years ago. She said she hopes people will show more empathy to each other.
I realize as an individual I can't personally put an end to it permanently, but bringing awareness does help.
Event organizers handed out free gun lock boxes. Partners for the event included Indianapolis Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, Indianapolis Office of Public Health and Safety, and Hoosiers concerned about gun violence. Legislation to eliminate the statute of limitations for some sex crimes died in the General Assembly this past session. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports on why and what the future of the effort could look like.
Prosecuting most sex crimes in Indiana generally has to happen within 5 years of the crime being committed. If it's a crime against a child, the statute of limitations runs until the victim turns 31. A 2024 bill originally eliminated that time constraint for all sex crimes, but was narrowed in the Senate just to rape and child molestation. The measure never got a hearing in the House, and House Committee Chair Wendy McNamara says that's because such a change shouldn't happen in a short session.
When you're talking about removing statute of limitations, there are a lot of mechanisms in the criminal justice system that I think just need to have a deeper conversation of what that looks like.
McNamara says she's absolutely open to something like a study committee on the issue. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
And for our final story today, an advocacy group of LGBTQ athletes and allies gathered outside of the NCAA's Inclusion Forum for a day of play to rally support for transgender athletes. As Indiana Public Broadcasting's Lauren Chapman reports, the demonstration comes on the heels of mounting pressure to tighten restrictions on transgender athletes.
Dr. Anna Baith is the Director of Research for Athlete Ally, a national LGBTQ athletic advocacy group. She says tighter restrictions would run contrary to science and the reality of healthcare access.
Ostensibly by saying, okay, well, we're going to limit testosterone, they're saying we're not allowing trans athletes to participate.
The NCAA has had policies in place for transgender athletes since 2010 and updated those requirements in 2022. A.T. Faruya is Athlete Ally's interim director of education. They say those policies are already rigorous.
Unless you're a trans person, you don't know how hard it is to even meet those requirements.
The NCAA's Board of Governors discussed the organization's current transgender athlete policy at a meeting and said it is under review. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Lauren Chapman.
That's all for today's episode of WFYI News Now. Our podcast is produced by the following people who live in your community: Drew Daudelin, Kendall Antron, who composed the music for this podcast, and me, Abriana Herron. Our news director is Sarah Neal-Estes. If you like today's episode, remember to subscribe and share, and follow WFYI on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube to check in on our newsroom throughout the day. Thanks for listening. We'll be back tomorrow.